Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And, for me, there are few things as tedious as having to review a musical biopic. This is just the most tiring and repetitive genre of film that I've ever had to sit through, and they get especially worse after something like Walk Hard, which is one of my favorite movies, where they just kind of point out that, these things are pretty damn formulaic as films go, and of course you have a hard time adjusting for that because they are based on real people's lives. They are based on real events. So, you can always take it from the point of view, well, I'm sorry that my life didn't follow a more interesting 3-act structure. But so, yeah, I'm not really a fan of this. And take away my USA card because I'm also not a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen. I like 2 of his songs, I think, both of which were anthems for movies. And the others, I'm aware of him, but I've never been a huge, Springsteen stan. So that's 2 strikes already against this picture. But, even with that going against it, that still means that you can find something redeemable in a film. But I'm sad to say I don't think that is the case here. I'm going real fast here, and I'm not taking the time I normally do with this, which I'm sure some people are very happy with. But the simple fact is, I do not know what to say about this movie. This was one of the most boring films I've seen all year. It's one of the most boring biopics that I've seen all year. I am not sure exactly what I'm supposed to talk about. It's been a day or 2 since I've seen it, and I have been scratching my head trying to come up with an angle to come at this review from, but simply put, there's just not a lot here. So let's take it in chunks here. Let's start with the basics. So one thing I do like, let's start with that. Let's start with the positive. This is the one thing I actually did appreciate about this movie versus other musical biopics, is that instead of trying to tell the complete life story of an artist, this one chooses to narrow its focus to a very specific point in time. Again, I'm not a Bruce Springsteen historian, but the film paints it, and bigger fans can say whether this was a wise choice or not, or how accurate it got. But so this film chooses to take place just as Bruce was becoming a big star, and right before he really went over that precipice into true superstardom. So he has just released a fairly popular album. Again, I don't know the name of Bruce Springsteen albums, I'm sorry, but it's one that had Born to Run on it. And he's now in the middle of trying to come up with his next album, which is going to be one of his most definitive, Nebraska. And so the film is about him trying to come up with that album and what that does to him, what that means for him, how it changed his sound and took it out of kind of the bar rock genre and put him into one of the more thoughtful lyricists and performers. You know, this is the thing that takes you out of being a big name and into being a huge name, if that makes any sense. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the narrowness of focus as opposed to trying to tell an entire life story in 2 hours, which inevitably is going to lead to things being omitted or points being overlooked or whatnot. Also, I have to say that from a strictly audience perspective, I have no musical talent, like none. So I have an interest in people's abilities that I could never match. You know, for instance, I love watching the Great British Baking Show. I can't bake. So watching these people do something that I can't even begin to comprehend is fascinating. The same thing a few years back, there was a show where these guys made custom Harleys, you know, and the mechanical know-how, the creativity, all of these things are things I have absolutely no concept of. So watching them go through that process is fascinating to me. So the idea of let's watch a movie about one of the biggest names in music writing an album, and like one of their most definitive albums, I think that was a smart choice. It allowed for a way to focus in on these points, what you have to tap into. I can relate from a creative standpoint on what you have to tap into in order to tell a story, to be creatively motivated. So you find that he is dealing with a lot of what we now know of are signs of depression and post-traumatic stress as it relates to his childhood and his relationship with his father. So he's tapping into a lot of these things as he's writing these songs and the way he wants them recorded and how he wants them to sound more raw and less polished. And they try doing them in the studio and they come out sounding too polished. And he's like, no, I don't want that. I want a direct transfer from the audio tape I did the demo on, because that's the grounded feel. Weird, but I actually find that aspect of the creative process fascinating because it's a creative process I have no frame of reference for. So I liked that aspect of this movie. I liked that that's where they went with it and that's how they chose to tell the story. I think that was a smart choice. And I'm afraid to say that that's kind of where my appreciation for this movie begins and ends. Because while I enjoyed that part of it, the rest of it, the filler, you know, the things moving from one point to the next are just a summary of this movie is Jeremy Allen White sitting places, staring, looking sad. That's the emotional journey from point A to point B. Sometimes he goes on a date and looks sad. Sometimes he's in his house playing music looking sad. Sometimes he's watching TV looking sad. Sometimes he's driving looking sad. There is so little actual dialogue in this film, which for a movie about songwriting, you'd think that would, you know, words would kind of be important, but, and again, that's not necessarily a sin in and of itself. It's fine to try to tell us a story more through the visuals than through dialogue. And I can actually see the appeal of doing a movie about writing an album and not using a lot of dialogue. I can see kind of the interesting take on that. But unfortunately, not enough happens to give this film any kind of grounding or anything. I hate to say this because I actually think Jeremy Allen White is a very talented actor. I do believe that. I'm not a fan of The Bear. I think it's one of the most pompous and up its own ass TV shows I've ever seen. But I do recall in the first season, there's an amazing scene where he gives this full-on monologue straight to the camera, no cuts, one take, fucking brilliant acting. And I really liked him in The Iron Claw. So I think that Jeremy Allen White is a very talented young actor. I really believe that. I just don't think any of that talent is being utilized here. You know, I do not. Right now, he has been nominated for a Golden Globe for this role, and I have no fucking idea why.
This is not your best work, Chris.
So, yeah, I just don't think this is his shining moment. But there is another problem I kind of have with this movie, and I do believe that this is a problem that just bugs me, and other people might not have as big an issue with it. When it comes to biopics, or even biographies, or, you know, documentaries, or whatever about a certain celebrity, there's usually two roads that they try to travel. Either, golly gosh, this person was the greatest human being who ever lived and never did anything bad and is such a genius that we all should get down on our hands and knees and kiss their feet. Or the other one, which goes this person that you grew up with was a right bastard, and as such, you should not like them. They were completely terrible human beings, and we're glad they're dead. You know? And it takes a really good picture to kind of strike the balance that a celebrity, no matter what field they're in, is a person, and therefore they have good qualities, they have bad qualities. They did great things with their life, but they also made big mistakes. And it's very difficult to kind of walk that line and find that balance. You know which biopic I think did a really good job of it? And this is going to sound funny. Notorious, the Notorious B.I.G. Biopic from the early 2000s, which did not make any qualms about the fact that he sold drugs, he beat the women he was with, and that he was in a lot of ways not a very good person. But it also tried to tell it from the perspective of, yeah, he did these bad things. He was also a kid, you know, in his early 20s, trying to learn adulthood and learn how to be a man when he had no real frame of reference. So it's not excusing the bad behavior, but it is also saying that it's also part of the good things, that there's he was a human being, in other words. And again, that's a very hard balance to strike. Not a lot of biopics can walk that line. And the problem with one like this, where you're trying to do it about someone who is already alive, and who I would bet that if you're going to use his songs, use his likeness, you know, all of this, that he's going to have to sign off on it. I am going to assume that. Maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't feel like it. And say whatever else you want about Bruce Springsteen, I think the one thing most people can agree with is the man has a fucking ego. Not unearned, you know, not without justification, certainly, but he's got a fucking ego. And this movie has just a little too much of the golly gosh, Bruce Springsteen is just the greatest, the bestest, the most brilliant recording artist that ever lived or breathed. It's got just a little too much of that. They try, I will give them credit that they try to ride the line and try to show the other side, particularly in the subplot where he's in a relationship with this woman who actually does not actually exist. She's an amalgam of all these other people he dated around the time he was writing this album. So they tried to show that, yeah, he wasn't the best with the people he was with. But it never really comes down on the side of, boy, he could be a real jerk and, kind of use people sometimes. It comes down on the, yes, he did these bad things, but it's because he was so tortured. It's because he was such a tortured genius and had so much he was dealing with. The big trauma running through all this, as you can guess if you've ever seen a biopic before, is that he had issues with his father. His father was very abusive. I do believe his father actually had some form of dementia, and I think they touch upon that. So a lot of the album is him trying to work through those feelings, and of course, the movie comes down with, but Bruce was such a saint, he still forgave his father. Now, I'm not saying that's bad if that's what actually happened. I think that shows a lot of growth, and, it takes a lot to kind of, quote unquote, be the bigger person in a situation like that. So I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying from a narrative perspective, from a 3-act structure film perspective, it comes down a little bit too much on the, isn't this guy just the saint that walks among us and we're all so happy that he is here with us. Which is rings of untruth. This film has this thing of trying to sell itself on the idea that this is an artist kind of looking at themselves, doing some self-examination and some self-critique, but the critique still seems to be on other people and their behavior and their input. It comes off as, well, yes, I did, but others did this to me, or whatever. You know what it actually sounds like? Watch me offend 2 huge music fan bases at the same time. Watch me offend both Springsteen fans and Swifties. It rings a lot like some of Taylor Swift's albums to me. This thing of, oh, news coverage doesn't bother me, internet things don't bother me, nothing bothers me, and yet every fucking song on the album is how much this bothers me. It puts on the veneer of being self-critical and self-examining, but when you actually look at it, no, it's still kind of saying I'm in the right and everybody else is in the wrong. Now, that could just be a feeling I get. I could be 100% wrong about this. Other people may watch it and not get that, but it's the sense I got from it. I wish there was more to say. I wish there was more to analyze and more to get into, but that leads us to the biggest problem with this film, is that there's not. You know what this movie is, and we've already seen an example of it, and I've already gotten shit for it, for saying it, but I speak the truth as I see it. This movie, in my opinion, from what I'm reading, it was not made to tell us a story. It was not made in order to give us a greater understanding of one of our greatest living artists. It's not meant to show us a process or anything to that effect. What this movie is it's Oscar bait. That is what it is. That's what it is, pure and simple. This movie, you can play the Oscar bait bingo card game with it, and you get a bingo in 10 seconds. It is a late in the year release. It is a musical biopic. It has an actor doing a bad impression of a famous person. All things the Academy loves. Bohemian Rhapsody, Ray. These are things that are These are things that are tried and tested means of getting people Oscars. And that's all this film feels like to me. And I said it before, and I've already gotten some thumbs down for it, which is fair. You're free to have your own opinions, but it's just like Nuremberg. For all of its preening and posturing and in the pretentious way it's filmed, like I said, the thousands of shots of Jeremy Allen White just sitting and staring blankly, for all of its pretense towards a deeper meaning, this film is surprisingly, shockingly shallow and surface level. Like I said, most clips in this, you could just put the term Oscar clip under it.
Am I supposed to be a man? Am I supposed to say, that's okay, I don't mind, I don't mind? Well, I mind big time. And you know what the worst part of all is? I never learned to read.
That true?
Yes, everything except the reading part.
But yeah, it other than that, it leaves no impression. There's nothing here. It doesn't even have the decency to be a complete fucking nuts biopic like Bohemian Rhapsody, which is also a bad movie with an overrated actor, in my opinion, doing a bad impression of a celebrity that won him an Oscar. But that movie is so batshit off the wall and crazy and almost downright offensive in its historical inaccuracies that it's kind of charming after a fashion. This movie has none of that. This movie wants to be taken 100% seriously, and it has absolutely nothing to say. There's no greater insight into the man, his art, his process, his personal life, nothing that we didn't know, nothing that hasn't been explored better in 1,000 other movies. It's an Oscar grab, and that's all it is. If you are a Bruce Springsteen fan, then you will probably get something out of it. You may enjoy it. So I don't want to just say like nobody can enjoy this. Like I say, if you are a Springsteen fan, you'll probably get more out of it than I do. But as it is, sorry, this one doesn't do anything for me. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about it. So let's wrap this up because there's not much else to get into. So final grade for Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. I'm gonna say a D, solid D, and because really, again, because there's nothing. The film is not ambitious enough to fail harder than that, and that's a shame because this won't be remembered as a great biopic, and it won't be remembered as a trashy, so bad it's entertaining biopic. It's just going to be, and there was the Bruce Springsteen film, and it's fluttered away, and no one's going to remember it in a year. So yeah, that's then what. And is there any greater sin than not being remembered? So there you have it. That is my take. All right. So, I'm not sure when this episode is going to drop. I'm not sure. As I'm recording it, we're in the waning days of 2025, so it may make it before the end of the year. It may be after the new year when we're still in our trying to catch up and get those last couple of films out mode, whatever. But whenever it releases, I hope it finds you and your family or you and yourself or whoever happy, healthy, and heading towards a fresh start and a new year. I'm looking forward to what the new year has to offer, and I hope you are too. So take care of yourselves. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for listening. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.